of the now what'll be with Deshaun Watson becoming the 32nd quarterback to start for Cleveland, assuming that all goes well and he is the opening day starter. Um, I mean, I guess it could be Jacoby Brissett, and it would still be 32 at that point. But yeah, so of the I think the Browns definitely have the most in the league, but now they have Deshaun Watson, who is by far the most talented quarterback that they've ever had. In the history of that franchise. Like I think without a doubt. Um,
Yeah, and to have 31 from 99, and they had Baker for like 4 years. So
yeah,
if you take off four years, like 2018, so that's from like 99 to 2018. That's like almost two starting quarterbacks a season.
yeah, and a lot of these guys. Okay, so like the first one was Tim Couch, who they selected first overall. He got a number of snaps there. I'm only going to like talk about the really notable ones here. Most of the other ones there, Jeff Garcia, former Niners quarterback,
Oh, okay.
started for them for about a season and a half. But it was after his Niners days and Lions days, so it was kind of at the tail end of his career. Trent Dilfer, former Ravens Super Bowl quarterback, former Super Bowl winning quarterback.
Okay, well, I
Uh,
know two already so far, so
yeah. Charlie Fry, I know you wouldn't know him. Derek
nope.
Anderson actually had one good season, got himself a contract extension, and then pretty much like never got heard of again. Ken
Yeah, I
Dorsey,
never heard of him.
former University of Miami backup. Brady Quinn went to Notre Dame. He's more known as an analyst now. You've probably seen him doing like
The
post game
name the
stuff.
name sounds like slightly
Yeah,
familiar.
yeah.
Brady Quinn.
Bru-
Yeah.
Colt McCoy, who's still making a
Uh,
living in the NFL.
definitely no Colt McCoy.
He just signed a 2-year contract extension with the Cardinals. Brandon Whedon was their former first overall pick, who really was maybe one of the worst picks that they ever made.
And it goes on and on and on and on. They have had an absurd amount of quarterbacks at the Cleveland Browns. It's sad. If you didn't catch that at the beginning, before Deshaun Watson was signed and started for the Browns, since 1999, they had had a grand total of 31 quarterbacks, which again is just absurd. But then since then, they have had just a trough of random quarterbacks coming in and starting for them. And what I want to talk about today is, does that matter? And clearly it matters a little bit. How much does it matter? Do you need to have a healthy quarterback room to make it to the playoffs? Does having a consistently healthy quarterback room and consistent quarterback play take you to the playoffs? We're not talking about winning. We're just talking about making it to the playoffs. We're going to talk about that today. Please like the video and subscribe to First Kick Seahawks. First Kick Seahawks, where we prepare you for the first kick of every play by game day. And I'm excited about this topic because the Seahawks have had a historically good quarterback situation. I would argue their entire existence as an NFL team, but we're going to go since 2012, right? 2012 is when Russell Wilson came in, took over the job for Matt Flynn. And then since then, we've only had two other quarterbacks start for the Seahawks. Obviously, Geno Smith, but then Drew Lock. I was a bit surprised because I thought Tavares Jackson had at least one Week 16 game somewhere in like 2015-ish, 2014-ish. Nah, he finished some games, but he did not start. We're going to talk about some of the other NFC West teams and just how good our room is in comparison. And I also want to talk about some AFC teams too, so you can get more context. So the Seahawks, since 2012, so 12 seasons, 11 seasons now, we're entering our 12th season since then, have had three starting quarterbacks, right? Russell Wilson, Geno Smith, Drew Lock. Out of those, out of the 11 seasons, we've gone to the playoffs 9 times. That's pretty fucking good for any team, right? For context, the Patriots since 2012 have also gone to the playoffs 9 times. The Chiefs, who did not have a quarterback for the longest time, have gone to the playoffs 10 times since 2012. It's actually absurd. So when you look at our rivals, the 49ers, they have had 9 quarterbacks since entering the league. And I find that fascinating for a couple reasons. I am using quirkyresearch.com for this. I will leave this in the chat for you to check out yourself. But this is my resource because there's a lot of quarterbacks to go over. Too many. But since 2012, the 49ers started with Colin Kaepernick. Remember, he took the job from Alex Smith at the end of the 2011 season. Actually, no, I'm wrong. Alex Smith did start 2012. He went out with a concussion, and then Colin Kaepernick came in and never took it back. So since 2012, the 49ers have had 10 quarterbacks, and they've gone to the playoffs 6 times. They had Alex Smith, Colin Kaepernick, Blaine Gabbert of Jaguars fandom, and that didn't work well for them. Brian Hoyer, C.J. Beathard, Jimmy Garoppolo finally came in, but after Jimmy Garoppolo, they still had Nick Mullins, and it was a constant trade between Garoppolo, Mullins, Beathard, Garoppolo. Basically, Garoppolo suffered from sprained right ankle. Mullins then got benched, and then Beathard signed with the Jaguars as a free agent, which then brought Garoppolo back in, who then injured his right calf, which then brought in Trey Lance, who sprained his left knee. Right? Just terrible quarterback luck. Lance broke his ankle at one point. Garoppolo tore a ligament. And then after all of that, Brock Purdy started, got injured, but they had a meaningless game, so they let him rest and let Sam Bradford start. So Sam Bradford had an 0-1 record for the 49ers. For the record, Brock Purdy is 21-6 as a starting quarterback. And that's a whole lot of quarterback chaos for a measly 6 playoff seasons, which isn't terrible, right? Because some teams don't make the playoffs at all. But they made the playoffs the last 3 seasons, 23, 22, and 21. Made it in 2019 where they lost the Super Bowl. That's what I like to hear. And then before that, they had 5. They had 5 seasons where nothing happened and made the playoffs in 2013 and 2012. For the record, they also did make the playoffs in 2011 with Alex Smith. So, regardless, in those 12 seasons, they only had 6 Super Bowl appearances, playoff appearances under their belt. And again, part of that was during the 28 season and 2014 seasons. A lot of health issues, right? Colin Kaepernick was going down and they had to replace him with a lot of nonsense. They had head coach problems. For instance, they had Tom Sula in 2015 and they had Chip Kelly in 2016. Kyle Shanahan finally showed up in 2017 and it took him 3 seasons to make it to the playoffs, where he did go to the Super Bowl right away. But even Kyle Shanahan, he's only been to the Super Bowl 4 times out of his 7 seasons. When you look at the Rams, it's a similar situation. They've had 14 starting quarterbacks, though. This might take a minute. Let's get through these Rams quarterbacks because there's a lot of names that you should remember. They started with Sam Bradford, who was their first round pick. I think he was first overall. He was up there, right? He was supposed to be the next Matt Stafford. He tore his left ACL and he only had a 10-12-1 record. And then in 2013, Clemens started, Kellen Clemens, who had started for them in 2011, so he'd been around. Clemens had a 4-5 record before signing with the Chargers as a free agent. And then Bradford tore his ACL again in the 2014 preseason and didn't start, which then brought in Sean Hill, who ended up being 0-1. But in that game where he started, he strained his left calf. So they had to start Austin Davis. Austin Davis had a 3-5 record, and he got benched for being a bad quarterback, and they brought Hill back in, who then finished with a 3-4 record before signing with the Vikings. And then Bradford, after that 2014 season, was traded to the Eagles for Nick Foles. This was after Nick Foles had done that 7-touchdown game in a season with Chip Kelly before Nick Foles won a Super Bowl. Right? So they got a Super Bowl caliber quarterback who started in 2015 but got benched after a 4-5 record for Case Keenum, who went 0-1, got knocked out with a concussion. Bring Foles back in, who loses 2 games. Keenan then gets a 7-6 record to finish the 2015 season. And then because of that, they got Jared Goff, drafted number 1 overall. Jared Goff from 2016 to mid-2017 had an 11-11 record, and the Rams did clinch that division that year. But then in 2017, they had to start Sean Mannion, who lost 1 game. Midway through the 2017 season, up to the wild card, and then I think that's when he came back. And then through the 2020 season, Jared Goff had a 33-18 record before breaking his right thumb. Going up against the Seahawks, John Wolford got a start. He had started, I believe, the week before to end the season. But then John Wolford ends up getting a neck stinger against the Seahawks. And Jared Goff then comes in with a broken thumb and beats us. But as a starter, John Wolford technically had a 2-0 record. Jared Goff then plays again a little bit more in 2020, loses in the division, has an 0-1 start, right? And then traded to the Lions for Matt Stafford. Matt Stafford played most of the 2021, midway through the 2022 season, though. He got a concussion. He had a 19-10 record before he had a concussion, so almost double, right? 2-1. And they had to bring in Wolford again, who lost a game. And then they brought in Stafford back, who then lost a game and was taken out with a neck and concussion. And then they bring in Bryce Perkins, who lost a game, so they benched him for Wolford, who came back, and he had a 1-win, 1-loss record before being benched again for Baker Mayfield from the Browns. Baker Mayfield played 4 games, and everyone thought, yes, this is the next coming of Baker Mayfield. He fixed himself. Everything's going to be great. Granted, that offensive line in particular was one of the worst offensive lines in NFL history. Statistically, it had more formations of various players along the 5 than any other team ever, and it wasn't particularly close. It's because their offensive line kept getting injured. And then their practice squad guys would get injured. So then they'd sign some rando who would then get injured. It was bad. He had a 1-3 record before Matthew Stafford came back. Matthew Stafford goes 3-5, has a sprained right thumb. And because of the sprain in 2023, they bring in Brett Ripien, who then lost a game, which then brought Stafford back. And he went 6-1, and the Rams then clinched that wild card round in 2023. Carson Wentz played 1 game because the Rams didn't need him to Stafford to start. Carson Wentz went 1-0, and then Stafford played in the wild card game and lost. So that is a hell of a lot that I just gave you. But basically, there were 14 starting quarterbacks in there, and they only had 6 playoff appearances to show for it. Half the time, they're making the playoffs. Most of that, of course, is with Sean McVay, but there's just so much going on with that team, and they're still making the playoffs consistently. You might say we need to make the playoffs every single year, but that's a little unreasonable when you have the Seahawks going to the Super Bowl. You have the 49ers going to multiple Super Bowls. The Cardinals almost made it to a Super Bowl, right? There's only so many wins to go around in one of the best divisions in football this last decade. It's different than, say, the Browns. We'll get to them in a second because I want to top things off with the Cardinals. So like the Rams, who had 14 starting quarterbacks, the Cardinals, and only, 5 playoff appearances to show for it, the Cardinals have had 15 starting quarterbacks since 2012 and 3 playoff appearances to show for it. This list is also depressing. This is probably the worst list of quarterbacks in the NFC West, and some of these names are repeats from the other teams. So, if you remember, Russell Wilson's first game was against the Cardinals, and to start that game was Skelton. I think his name was John Skelton. He had been with the Cardinals from 2010 up until the 2012 season, and he and Kevin Kolb had traded off repeatedly. Kevin Kolb, when we went into that game, I believe was the backup. This was the game where Doug Baldwin drops a ball in the end zone because he gets hit in the face and his teeth get ripped up. It was a memorable game for me. But to start the game, John Skelton played, and it was not going well, and he had a sprained right ankle. So then Kevin Kolb comes in, wins the game. In fact, he starts off the season fairly well with a 3-2 record, one of them beating the Seahawks, right, who ended up being one of the standout teams. Then John Skelton had to come back in, but he was benched for an 0-4 record. They then replaced him with Ryan Lindley, who I think we just discussed being on the Rams briefly. Ryan Lindley then got benched after 2 years. Skelton came back, and then we blew Skelton out 58-0, right? Everyone remembers that 58-0 game where the Seahawks just could not stop kicking their ass. That was basically the end of Skelton's career. He got benched. Following week, Lindley then gets the start again. It's a 1-1 record before Brian Hoyer comes in to start for the Cardinals. The Cardinals had traded with the Raiders for Carson Palmer, and then Hoyer was released after his 0-1 start in week 16 of the 2012 season. Game 16, it was week 17. Carson Palmer, right, used to be an amazing Bengals player till he got hurt, went to the Raiders under Dennis Allen. Dennis Allen was not a good head coach, and that team fell apart. He ended up getting benched for Terrell Pryor. Regardless, Carson Palmer, starting out for the Cardinals, had an 11-6 record before he injured his right shoulder. And so then they had to start with Drew Stanton, who then went 2-1 before Carson Palmer. That's one of those where my tongue gets tongue-tied. Carson Palmer then comes back in the 2014 season, goes 5-0 before tearing his left ACL. Brings back Drew Stanton, goes 3-2. Then he sprains his right MCL and ACL in 2014. So then Lindley starts again in 2014, makes it to the wild card game. They go 0-3, and then they lose. Carson Palmer again to start the 2015 season. He goes 15-7 up until the 2016 season, right? So the Cardinals are cooking with him. But because of a concussion, by week 4 of the 2016 season, they had to bring back Drew Stanton, who goes 1-0. Carson Palmer then can come back. He goes 8-9-1, making it through the 2016 season into the 2017 season, week 7. He breaks his left arm, which brings back Drew Stanton, who then goes 1-1 before spraining his left knee. Blaine Gabbert, then there's another Blaine Gabbert reference, right? Starts in week 11 and then goes to week 15 of the 2017 season, has a 2-3 record. Is ineffective, so they bench him for Drew Stanton, who has historically been ineffective. So why do you keep benching a guy who could be better, and then bringing back the guy you've already determined isn't good enough to start. Drew Stanton at the end of the 2017 season, because the Cardinals don't make the playoffs, he signs with the Browns as a free agent, and then the Cardinals actually signed Sam Bradford as a free agent. Sam Bradford, of course, formerly of the Rams. He has an 0-3 start, and he's ineffective. So they start Josh Rosen, who is the 10th overall pick of the 2018 draft at quarterback. He went 3-8 from week 4 of 2018 to week 16 of 2018. He then, after that season, was traded to the Dolphins, and the Cardinals then drafted Kyler Murray first overall in the 2019 draft. But it doesn't end there. From 2019 week 1 to 2021 week 8, they had a solid chunk of Kyler Murray, right? First overall pick. And if you remember before, I said that when they got Matt Stafford at the Rams, he had 19 wins to 10 losses to start his career as a Rams quarterback. Kyler Murray, to start his career as a Cardinals quarterback, was 20, 19, and 1. Right? That's bad. That's a 1-to-1 ratio. That's not going to get you anywhere. So bad, in fact, that when he got a sprained left ankle, Colt McCoy came in from week 9 of 2021 to week 11, and he had a 2-1 record, which is technically a better ratio, even though the data is not quite as thick, right? Kyler Murray then comes back in week 13 of the 2021 season, and he plays for 16 games going into the 2022 season, week 9. So he's got a nice, healthy chunk of being healthy. And he goes 5-11 before straining his hamstring. So he has yet to prove that he could be a playoff caliber quarterback. They then bring in Colt McCoy, who plays week 10, 2022 to week 11, 2022, 1-1 record. And then Murray comes back in week 12 and tears his left ACL after 2 games and having an 0-2 record. So far, Colt McCoy has had a better quarterback record as a Cardinal than Kyler Murray. And he probably had a better career as a Ram as well. Colt McCoy then in week 15 goes down with a concussion, 0-1. And they start this guy I've never heard of before, Trace McSorley, and they sorely needed to not start him. He was ineffective and went 0-1. And then he was benched for David Blau, who finished the season playing week 16 and the week 17 games. He went 0-2. To start the 2023 season, though, the Cardinals had the, what was he called? The Pastronaut, Joshua Dobbs. He started week 1 of the 2023 season to week 8, went 1-7. So people were really excited about the Pastronaut, even though he's got one of the worst quarterback ratios, win rates out here. He was traded to the Vikings after Kirk Cousins went down. And they started Clayton Tune from week 9 to week 9 because he also was ineffective and went 0-1. Kyler Murray came back in the season. Everybody said he changed the team. The team looks so much better with Kyler Murray. They went 3-5 to finish the season with Kyler Murray. Now, again, I just threw you a lot of shit. But in 12 seasons, the Cardinals have had 15 starting quarterbacks, and they only have 3 playoff appearances to show for it. That's not good. That's really not good. You know what's really good, though? What's, like, surprisingly good? Is, hold on, where is it? The Patriots. Right? The legendary Patriots have Tom Brady forever. He's almost always healthy. They had 7 starting quarterbacks in 12 years. 9 playoff appearances. It's not bad. Sorry, 11 years. 2021 to 2023. That's 11, Cam. That's how math works. They did have Matt Castle start some games in 2008. But basically, it was Tom Brady from 2000. I'm just going to go 2009 week 1 to week 18 in 2015. And then he was suspended 4 games for his role in Deflategate. But this dude, he went a good 93 wins to 33 losses in a row. No injuries to speak of. Played every single season for years and years and years. And then Jimmy Garoppolo comes in week 1 of the 2016 season. This is before, obviously, he goes to the 49ers. He had just been drafted for replacing Ryan Mallett, I believe, was their previous backup. But he went 2-0 before spraining his right shoulder in that week 2 game. So then Jacoby Brissett, right? Very popular journeyman quarterback at this point. In 2024, a popular quarterback, right? But at the time he was young. He had a 1-1 record in 2016 before Tom Brady came back. Tom Brady played week 5 2016 to the wild card round in 2019, and he went 55 wins to 15 losses. So basically, when he was healthy, dude went 93 plus 55 and 33 plus 15, which is 48 losses, right? He had more losses, less losses over the course of 17 years than he had wins in just the 2016 to 2019 seasons. Oh, I still got that math wrong. About 18 years. I don't know. From 2000. Oh, that's 10 years. Yeah, for over 10 years, he had 45 losses, and then he had 148 wins. Sorry, to 48 losses. Yeah, he averaged 100 more wins than he did losses. That is absurd. He then gets traded to the he gets signed to the Buccaneers. They bring in Cam Newton to start the 2020 season. He goes 2-1, he lost to the Seahawks, I think. I think he did lose to the Seahawks in that time. He had to get benched because he got COVID. They bring in Brian Hoyer, right? Brian Hoyer is another one of those journeymans. He started 1 game, lost 1 game. Bring back Cam Newton. He had a 5-7 record to finish the season. Then he was released in training camp, and they drafted Mac Jones in the first round to replace him. Mac Jones, he started the entire 2021 season, and then he started up to week 3 in the 2022 season before spraining his left ankle, and he had an 11-10 record. Kyler Murray status, right? Not great. That's not going to get you to the playoffs, and in fact, it did not. They then bring in Brian Hoyer again, who starts a game, gets a concussion, goes out. Bailey Zappi time. Boom, boom. He plays 2 games, and he wins 2 games before Mac Jones finally comes back for week 7 of the 2022 season. Mac Jones then continues to be healthy week 7 of 2022 to week 12, which is game 11 of the 2023 season. He gets benched for being ineffective. He had a 7-15 record, which is comparable to how Kyler Murray has been. Bailey Zappi then finishes the season, and he has a 2-4 record. Again, I'm throwing you a lot of names. So since 2009, right, we're doing our thing from 2012, but for the Patriots in particular, since 2009, they've had 7 starting quarterbacks. And then from 2012 to now, they have had 9 playoff appearances. Seahawks still leading with their 3 quarterbacks and 9 playoff appearances. Even the Patriots have double. So what's comparable to us? Well, surprisingly, is the Chargers. Where's that Charger thing? That's the Chiefs. Chargers. So since 2006, since week 1, 2006, this is right after they traded for Phillip Rivers and Drew Brees, because Drew Brees played for the Chargers from 2004 to 2005. and then he's signed with the Saints. But Phillip Rivers, he played from 2006 to 2019, week 16, 0 injuries. Right, that's like some Russell Wilson health right there. He added 129 wins to 106 losses. So just slightly above a 1-to-1 ratio. That's not going to get you to the playoffs. Tyrod Taylor started a game for them. He had a 1-0 record before having his cracked ribs and then a punctured lung. I think that was a doctor. One of the medical staff was going for the ribs and accidentally got to the lung, and so that finished his season. They then drafted Justin Herbert, who started week 2 of the 2020 season. He had a broken right index finger, but from 2020 towards week 14, game 13 of the 2023 season, he had a 30-33 record. So basically his win rate is, again, the same as Kyler Murray. It could prove to get worse. It could prove to get better. We'll find out because he hasn't been in the league that long. But they started Easton Stick for 4 games after he went down. And that's the guy that the Seahawks just kicked all over the field in week 1 of the 2024 preseason. So to reiterate, since 2006, they have had 4 quarterbacks. How many playoff games do you think the Chargers have had since 2006, considering how healthy their quarterbacks have been? I'll give you a second to think. If you guessed 3, you would be correct. The Cardinals, who have had 15 quarterbacks since 2012 alone, have just as many playoff appearances as the Chargers, who have had 4 since 2006. That's scary. That's scary because that says it doesn't matter if you have a Phillip Rivers or a Justin Herbert and your backups only start 5 games since 2006. You still could not make the playoffs with one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league every single year. How do you get to the playoffs if you have a possible Hall of Fame quarterback in Phillip Rivers and one of the best young quarterbacks in the league in Justin Herbert? One of those games was Justin Herbert making it to the playoffs and getting embarrassed by the Jaguars. How does that happen? It's not like they were going up against powerhouses in that division at the time until Peyton Manning showed up in 2012. I don't understand how that happens. But nobody, and I mean nobody, is as bad as the Cleveland Browns. As we started at the beginning, since the 1999 season, up until they signed Deshaun Watson, they had 31 starting quarterbacks, which is absolutely absurd. Let's see. They brought in Deshaun Watson to start the 2022 season. So in 22 seasons, I think that's how math works, from 99 to 2022. To 2021. They had started 31 quarterbacks. Since then, when you add Deshaun Watson, when you add Thomas Robinson, PJ Walker now on the Seahawks, when you add Joe Flacco and Jeff Driscoll, they've had 36 starting quarterbacks since 1991. That is actually a broken franchise right there. That's as bad as it actually gets. But since 2012, they have had 22, which means that they actually did have some quarterback consistency kind of to speak of from 99 to 2011. Over those 12 seasons, they were kind of like the Cardinals. They were kind of like the 49ers, like the Rams. The 49ers had 10 quarterbacks in 11 seasons, right? So it's not completely crazy. You could still be productive. But to speak of it, since 2012, the Browns have had 2 playoff appearances. Baker Mayfield for 1. But what's crazy is you have 22 starting quarterbacks, and then you have the Chargers who had 4. And the Chargers only have 1 more playoff game to show for it. And the Browns actually do have have like competition in their division. The Ravens have been consistently good. The Steelers have always been good. The Bengals had that really good run. They have had competition, but they just can't get a quarterback. And they still made the playoffs almost as many times as the Chargers, who are in a whole heck of a mess. As far as like, you have no excuse for not making the playoffs, not losing in the playoffs, not even making it. Absolutely absurd. Man, they even had Seneca Wallace start for the Browns. This gets to the cherry on top. All right, so after the 2012 season, to start the 2013 season, the Chiefs had traded the 49ers for Alex Smith. In 2012, though, the Chiefs started with Matt Castle, formerly of the Patriots, who went out with a concussion. He had a 1-4 record. Chiefs then had Brady Quinn start 2 games. He goes out with a concussion. I actually remember the Matt Castle concussion because that was my start of hating the Chiefs, because the fans cheered, not that because he was getting wheeled off. They cheered that he got a concussion. Not all of them, but enough of them that I've never liked their fans ever since. So Matt Castle started 1-4, concussion. Brady Quinn 0-2, concussion. Matt Castle then starts 3 games, gets benched because he's ineffective. They bring back Brady Quinn. He goes 1-5 to finish the season. Not good. Alex Smith then comes in. He goes to start the 2013 season, 11-4. The Chiefs then clinched the wild card, and he got benched for that final game for Chase Daniel, who goes 0-1. To start the 2013 season in the wild card game, all the way to week 16, game 15 of the 2014 season, Alex Smith then goes 8-8, and he has to go out of that 15th game because of a lacerated spleen. They then start Chase Daniel again, who goes 1-0. Smith then comes back for week 1 of the 2015 season to week 8, game 7 of the 2016 season. And he ends up going out with a concussion and a lacerated ear after going 17-8. Right? So statistically, as a Chiefs starting quarterback, he has had at least a 2-to-1 ratio in every single season, which is really good. That's Matthew Stafford to the Rams type of stat, right? It's not the same as a Kyler Murray where it's 1-to-1 or 0.5-to-1. When he goes down in 2016, week 9, game 8, Nick Foles then gets a start. That dude's been everywhere, right? He goes 1-0 before Alex Smith then comes back. He then, from 2016 week 10 to 2017 week 16, has a 15-9 record, and they then clinch the playoffs again. And I believe they lose in that game. Patrick Mahomes actually in 2017, he played the week 17 game, the 16th game of their season, goes 1-0. Alex Smith then loses the wild card game, and he gets traded to the Commanders. Patrick Mahomes then starts the 2018 season, and he doesn't get hurt until week 7 of the 2019 season with a dislocated right kneecap. But he goes 18-7. Again, practically a 2-to-1 ratio plus. Really good quarterback play for the Chiefs. Matt Moore ends up starting 2 games because of the dislocated kneecap, and they go 1-1. But that season, the Chiefs had already clinched the playoffs. So Mahomes starts week 10 of 2019, and then up until week 16, week 15 of the 2020 season, he has a 23-2 record. That's an 11-1 ratio. That's the best ratio we have seen from a quarterback yet. And that was that season where I think he threw over 50 touchdowns. One of the best offenses you'll ever see. Just absurd, right? But when the Chiefs have a healthy quarterback, they're ready to go. They're going to make it to the playoffs, which is completely different than the Chargers. Chad Henne finished the last game of the 2020 season because it was meaningless. He lost from week 17 of 2020 through week 17, game 16 of the 2023 season. Patrick Mahomes ends up going 43-14. An absurd rate. That's that Tom Brady record that we talked about earlier, where the wins are just so surpassing the losses don't even matter anymore. Why calculate it? Took them to the playoffs. They clinched the 3rd seed. And then that gave Blaine Gabbert, again, a chance to start the final week of the 2023 season. He goes 1-0. And then from 2023 wildcard game to the 2023 Super Bowl against the 49ers, Mahomes goes 4-0. Again, a lot of quarterbacks. They had 9 quarterbacks, 10 playoff appearances in 11 seasons. I believe that's correct. Let me double check that because that feels weird. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yep, that's right. So we are basing this off of 12 because they didn't make the playoffs in 2012, didn't make the playoffs in 2014. Still absolutely absurd that they have gone to the playoffs as many times as they have. In fact, they're on par. Actually, they're exceeding the Patriots by 1, and they're exceeding the Seahawks by 1. And we have had 3 quarterbacks in the same amount of time that they've had 9. The 49ers have had 10 quarterbacks, but only 6 playoff appearances. And then you get the Cardinals, who had 15, the Browns, who had 22. But then when you look at the Chargers, they've had 4 since 2006, which is actually historically good, and only 3 playoff appearances. What gives? Because it's not like the Chiefs have had juggernaut defenses except for last year. It's not like the Chiefs haven't had competition in their divisions any greater than the Chargers. They're in the same division as the Chargers. And they've had to deal with the Broncos, right? But the years that the Broncos made it to the playoffs with Peyton Manning, except for 2014, the Chiefs made it to the playoffs. So does the number of quarterbacks you have start matter? And at what point does it not matter anymore? Or what point does you've had so many quarterbacks, it just shows dysfunction in your organization and in your general manager room? And so does your starting quarterback even matter? I mean, clearly if you have a Tom Brady, his win rate is insane. But he only has 9 playoff appearances to show for it. Chiefs, win rate is insane. Same basic rate of playoff appearances. Chargers, really stable organization, can't get to the playoffs to save their damn lives. And they have that 1-to-1 ratio. What pushes them over the edge? Because the Chargers had Keenan Allen, and they had a couple other really good tight ends whose name is eluding me right now. And they've had Austin Eckler, and they've had all of this talent on the offensive side, and on the defensive side, they've had some talent there as well, including Joey Bosa. What does it take to just get to the playoffs? Because when the Browns have 22 starting quarterbacks and 2 playoff appearances, and that's almost as many playoff appearances as the really good quarterback room Chargers, it makes me think. It entirely seems to depend on the general manager. Which team can min-max the roster better than another team because Russell Wilson absurdly healthy. I didn't even give you his stats. Is it this one? Is it this one? I want to bring this up really quick to help hammer in this point. Russell Wilson had an 108-57-1 record before Geno Smith finally came in and got his start, right? He was healthy from 2012 to week 5 of 2021. And then he kind of fell off a mat, but he had a 2-to-1 ratio, just about. So how do you get to that 2-in-1 ratio so that you can make the playoffs almost every single year? He never had a good offensive line. He had an amazing defense for half of that time. The other half, he kind of he would pull stuff out of his butt, right? He had a great coach. He had a great culture and a great general manager who would find a way to win. I don't think having a top 5, top 10 quarterback matters. Clearly, you don't want to have 22 quarterbacks. Clearly, 15 quarterbacks is a problem. But even with 15 quarterbacks, the Cardinals had 3 playoff appearances, which is just as many as the Chargers. What matters, I think, more than a good quarterback room is consistency. You could say Patrick Mahomes is different, but he has the same ratio for the most part as Alex Smith did, except for that one season where he was phenomenal. I think you might have a top 10 defense. You might not. You might have a top 10 offense. You might not. It is pretty obvious that the 49ers and Rams and Patriots and Chiefs have always had a top 10 offense in the years that they go to the playoffs, but the Chargers consistently did too, and they never made it. The Seahawks consistently had one of the worst offensive line units in the league, from 32 to about 25. And they had 9 playoff appearances. It's about culture. Who is talking to the 53 young men on the field? It does reach a point where you're like, man, we're on our 5th quarterback this season. We're hosed. But if you just have a quarterback, that's not going to get you to the playoffs. If you have a terrible offensive line and Wolford comes in and starts, you might still get close to the playoffs. But I just honestly feel like it's a culture thing set up by the owners and by the general manager and the head coach. That's what gets you to the playoffs. Quarterbacks are second. Having a Hall of Famer on your team on defense, right? That's just a cherry on top. The entire team needs to be walking and breathing the same way as the organization. And when you look at the Cleveland Browns, they have been chaotic since they became an expansion team in 1999. The Chargers have just been uncompetitive in the front office and never gave Phillip Rivers anything to truly work with. Never gave that defense a second thought. It's about a competitive front office. It's about the executives and the coaches, not the quarterback. That being said, if Geno Smith plays this entire season, we could probably have the same amount of wins as if he played half and then Sam Howell starts. Why would you ever pay top dollar for a quarterback unless it's a Patrick Mahomes who you're not going to get? Tom Brady, when he goes to the Buccaneers, Bruce Arians ran that shit and it was awesome because he'd already proven that he can create culture with the Cardinals and Carson Palmer. Soon as Bruce Arians is gone, that team is dysfunctional. Head coaches matter. Front organizations matter. They're the ones calling the plays. They're the ones breaking down the tape. They're the ones telling the players what to do, and the rest fits. And this is why Pete Carroll was so good with some terrible teams. is because even when his coaches were bad, the culture was so good that he never lost the players until the end of that last 2023 season. People were always competing. They always thought they could win, and they never gave up. And they were just scrappy. Mike McDonald, if he starts off and he's not a good coach, I will be very surprised because he's got Leslie Frazier with him. He's got Kirk Olividotti with him. The big question mark is Ryan Grubb's offense. But if Ryan Grubb is legit, there's absolutely no reason we can't continue this record of playoff appearances. 0. Our roster alone is stacked because John Snyder has proven he can keep teams, he can build good teams. And this is one of the best teams we've had since 2016. All we need is good culture. And if Mike McDonald brings in good culture, look out. This dude is young as hell. He could be our coach for a very long time. He could be our coach for the same amount of years as the Browns have had quarterbacks since 2012. 22 years, right? And then retire in his 50s. Y'all should be excited. Before I go, we got someone in the chat. Eric Gilbertson says, preach. Putting so many resources into the quarterback position hurts the rest of the team's ability to attract quality players in the other positions. In John, we trust. And I've talked about this before. By the way, thank you for the comment, because you actually do hammer in my point. If we were paying for a Patrick Mahomes, I'd say never pay DK Metcalf, get him out of here. There's a balance for how much you can get out of your quarterback and your offense. And if you pay too much on offense, then you can't have any money for the offensive line. You don't have any money for the defense. And if you have an elite quarterback, he's only going to make the receiver so much better. If he's an elite receiver, that dude's already maxed out, and you can probably get him an extra yard or two per reception. But if you have an elite quarterback, he's going to elevate normal average receivers like Puka Nacua. Yeah, I always bring it out at Puka because I don't like him. But you can make an average receiver like Puka Nacua look like an elite receiver just because you have an elite quarterback. You have Russell Wilson throwing bombs to Jermaine Kearse, who is opposite of Doug Baldwin, and Russell's going to make Kearse look like an elite receiver. And then as soon as he loses the quarterback, it's gone. So if you're going to pay for a top 5 quarterback, you don't need to pay for an elite receiver because the quarterback's going to get the ball there. But if you have an average quarterback, I'm not necessarily saying Geno Smith is average, but maybe. He's got so much damn talent around him. How could he possibly fail? He just needs to play football smart. And DK, Lockett, JSN, and the rest are going to take that ball and then play at an elite level. Because they're not going to play down to their quarterback. Sure, if the quarterback can't get them the ball at all because he's not an NFL caliber quarterback, then they're probably not going to look elite. But we've seen time and time again where somebody like Jamar Chase will play with someone who's not Joe Burrow and still have an elite stat. So I would really, really like us to continue keeping Geno Smith if he continues to be as good as he is. We could go ahead and try to draft some quarterback in the first round, which we've never done under John Snyder. But I don't think that's necessary. If you get a medium of the road quarterback, right? Geno Smith, 2nd round, Russell Wilson, 3rd round, and just have a lot of talent around him, he is going to succeed. Brock Purdy is the key example. Tom Brady is the key example, thrown to Randy Moss. If you have a ton of good resources around and you have quarterbacks that aren't taking up the entire budget, there's no reason you can't go to the playoffs. Now, if you have dysfunction like the Browns and the Cardinals, you're probably not making it. And if you're the Chargers and all you do is pay for your quarterback and receiver, you're probably not making it to the playoffs. But even the Chiefs, they've had a balanced quarterback contract, even with Patrick Mahomes. And they just decided not to pay Tyreek Hill because why would you? Why would you pay for a top 5 receiver if you're not going to make him much better? You can just elevate somebody else. Granted, last year they had a bunch of receivers that couldn't catch, but they had Travis Kelce and company. Yeah, that's my take after going through all this is as long as you have a consistent organization, you're gonna make it to the playoffs. I mean, there's also the case of your offense just fucking falls apart because of injuries. But who's going to predict that? The Ravens in 2015, for example, they still had Joe Flacco, and they had let go a bunch of people after winning the Super Bowl. But they were competing in 2014. Problem in 2015 is over 50% of their roster went on IR. I'm guessing 50%. It was really bad. All right. So you can't predict that. But if you have a healthy team, it's almost like the healthier the team and the better you micromanage the budget, the chances are that you're going to win. Cool. Well, we went over a whole lot today. I appreciate you all for being here. Please like the video and subscribe to First Kick Seahawks. Tomorrow we're going to start getting ready for the Titans preseason game. I'm going to go check some notes on when the Seahawks played the Titans in camp, because that was the first time in the last plus decade, maybe ever, that the Seahawks had played another team in camp. So that's kind of cool, and I want to see what reporters and people on the field, what notes they took, what certain matchups, and we'll get excited for the matches that are coming up against the Titans this next week. I also would expect Geno Smith to start at least one round, at least one drive this next week. And I also want to prepare some notes of what battles we still need to look for, right? We need to know if D. Williams, Eskridge, or Winston Jr. are going to be making the roster. Are we going to have a perfect 25-25 split for the players that are going to be on offense and defense, or is it going to be what I predict, which is a 24 offense, 26 defense split? If you're curious about that, you can watch the video from yesterday, where I went over the entire roster and did a quick prediction show, but we still got some holes. So thank you so much. Go Seahawks.